Good afternoon, and thank you very much first for inviting me and then bearing with me and giving me this platform and this opportunity to be with you. Actually, for me, this is the second time I've addressed a PMA gathering. Ironically, the first time was in Madurai when I was an opposition MLA in my first term in 2017 or 18. And I was very impressed that such an organization existed and it had a conference in Madurai. Because I must say that it was heartening to me to know two things about this conference. First, that there's 12,000 professionals in India who are members of this. That's a great start. We may need 120,000 eventually, in my view, but 12,000 is a great start. And also that this Global Project Professionals Forum is being held outside Europe for the first time. What better place than India, where we have so much of the world's working population today and will do for the next 20 years or so. I must also say that my career has taken 2 or 3 transformations. I was a student for a long time, but I was mostly in the engineering, manufacturing sector till about 1999. Then I was in financial services after getting my MBA in finance at the Sloan School at MIT. I was at investment banks, universal banks around the world. And then after 30 years an expatriate, I came back to India and became an elected representative, first as an opposition member and member of the Assembly's Public Accounts Committee, where we scrutinized the audit reports and understood all the ways that government fails. And then 5 years as a minister, the first 2 in charge of finance and planning and personnel and pretty much all of the administration, and then the last 3 in charge of information technology and digital services. And I say this because back in the days when I was in the engineering manufacturing field, I thought the greatest complexity I had ever seen was large systems that had great scale. Like I had been to the factory, I don't think it exists anymore, in Everett, Washington, where they used to have an assembly line to build the large body Boeings, including the 767 and the 747, which was like 8 miles or 10 miles long, one factory, a continuous assembly line. And I thought to myself, imagine the complexity of managing that process when parts come in from 30 or 40 states. And you start with a frame at one end and a fully assembled 747 at the other. I also had the luxury of visiting some big naval shipyards and some big mines, 100 million tons a year kind of mines. And as a former engineer, as a former operations research major, marveled at the complexity of planning, building, and managing such systems. But then I went into the world of finance, and I realized that project management is even more complex in the service sector, particularly in the age of derivatization, globalization, securitization, when I was in banking. And the amount of systemic improvement that was needed to deal with the level of innovation that was happening was too high. In fact, part of the reason we had the global financial crisis is that neither the regulators nor the large market makers and players built the infrastructure and the systems to deal with the huge complexity that came with massive innovation in, as I say, derivatization and securitization. And then, of course, now I'm in government, and at least for a while, when I was in my own portfolio, we looked a lot at managing infrastructure projects and government projects. And in all of these, I am again and again reminded that possibly the weakest link is the execution capability. And a big part of that execution capability is not things like engineering, but actually project management, is administration, is the actual oversight. So I'm thrilled that such conferences bring people like you together, that you use these opportunities to not just network, as your president said, but also to enhance your understanding, to increase your skill set, to get exposed to new platforms and products, which I think some of the exhibitors out there will have. And in particular, given the theme you have this year, I thought I'd say a few things about AI, innovation, and sustainability. For me, it starts with digitalization. One of the best experiences I had in terms of thought provoking was visiting the global headquarters of the Nemetschek Group in Munich 2 or 3 years ago, right after I took over this portfolio. And I realized the kind of possibilities that were becoming available in terms of building information modeling management, both execution, but more than execution, planning once you had enough of a database, and eventually O&M, which I saw many old, large, complex buildings were retrofitting their digital twins so that they could have a better idea, because all people are temporary. Nobody stays in a firm forever. Buildings stay for a long time. And as people transition out, if you only have blueprints and physical plans, the knowledge gets lost. So these digital twins actually are such a huge improvement. And I thought about the many ways that the government could benefit from it. And by logic, because India is such a big player in technology and now in AI, we have two, three major companies that are growing rapidly. I'm very happy that one of them is in Madurai and started about 2 years ago with nothing. Now has about 1,800 employees and is going to open a new facility with my chief minister, where I will attend in Madurai, which is my constituency, in about a week from now. And that'll be another 1,200 people. And this is just purely BIM related work, and they have major projects like the Dubai airport and other things. So, in this age of digitalization, I think the first improvement is that you get institutional memory, continuity, stability, individual, independent institutional continuity. But then in the age of AI, you're going to get all kinds of additional benefits, because the more you digitalize, the more data you feed, the more likely these engines learn accurately, and they can start doing things predictively, which I'll give you an example why that's so important to us. Now, there's a lot of risk in AI. I mean, not that I'm that sophisticated in AI, but I've been in the technology space for a while now. One way or the other, my PhD dissertation was on human cognition and computer interface design, back when they were just about starting to have Windows and the Apple Macs. I age myself, but anyway, even in this coming of AI, while the computing power and the amount of data has grown infinitely, unimaginably compared to 20 years ago, the models have deep limitations. Every day we are learning more and more. You saw a few days ago a senior person retire or resign from Claude's parent company. And the letter he wrote was very thought provoking, because he was worried that we were removing all the guardrails and that these engines are not nearly as sophisticated as we think they are. And they're easily misled. And because they learn a lot more from mistakes than from successful outcomes, they may be learning the wrong things altogether. Or they may be programmed to make shortcuts that nobody has really contemplated. So I think, though this coming of the age of AI is probably more impactful, at least in kind of menial work, it comes with also much greater risks than the previous coming of age of AI. And in that context, this is one field where I think we would have relatively good risk return metrics, because as long as the data going in is relatively pure, we're only asking it to do extrapolation or learning patterns in a limited way with a very pure data set. The problem with these large models that are taking all the things under the sun is that the old adage of garbage in, garbage out, you end up with a lot of nonsense. You end up with, fantastic imagination of these engines creating all kinds of records that don't exist. But in your field, as long as the data is clean, I think the potential of AI is very high and the risk is relatively low. The same way I would say sustainability, as your president pointed out, is the need of the hour, and it is up to people like you to build it into your kind of initial description of the work, your project description, because it's much easier to do this from day one, retrofitting things or trying to bring in a improved environmental outcome, that is reduced environmental impact, is much harder than if it's designed right the first time. And actually the cost of relative efficiency in terms of reducing environmental impact is significantly lower now than it used to be a while ago, whether it's renewable energy, whether it's efficient cooling systems, whether it is material, recycled material, all of these, there's been huge innovation, and you can get cheaper, better materials now than you ever have. And it's going to keep going in that direction. I think there's so much innovation coming. Even in Tamil Nadu, when I travel around, I find young people who are innovating to suit their circumstances, coming up with such impressive possibilities. And I hope they'll get funded and we'll get to see the outcomes. I must say something about the government. That is, in the last 10 years, both in opposition and in office, actually governments are quite bad at project management. Most of us actually have lost the ability to do any real work. At one point, governments actually employed engineers to build things. Now we only have engineers to manage contractors. And that management is less than ideal. There was a World Bank report published around the time that I took office as a minister for the first time, right after the second wave of COVID, or during the second wave of COVID. And it highlighted that the vast majority of government projects in most countries run over cost, over budget, and over time. Right? And in many cases, it is because of this political disease where we announce first and then we plan later. Right? Everybody wants to have the credit of the announcement. So every politician is inclined to first announce, then check the feasibility, then check the design, then check the cost. And these things naturally lead to bad outcomes. There are things we can do about it. After we took office, we restarted a committee that had originally been established 20 years ago, again, on World Bank recommendations, called the Large Infrastructure Oversight Committee, Large Infrastructure Projects Oversight Committee. Of course, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they didn't have the platforms to manage it as well as we can now. So one of the rare occasions where I asked the Chief Secretary, I said, given my personal background, technical background, I would actually like to be chairman of this committee myself. And as many of you know, in the age of democracy that we live in, many of these committees are only IAS officer committees. There are very few committees or public sector enterprises where there's actually elected representatives who sit in an executive position. But in this case, it was a committee that had hundreds of projects. You can imagine a state like Tamil Nadu, which has annual budgets of 3-4 lakh crores and capex budgets of 40, 50, 60,000 crores. We'll have lots and lots of projects. So these big projects, and they continue over time. So we announce every year 50,000, and then we're doing collectively multi-year projects. And we started building the platforms for it. So first we started building trackers and, by department, what is the name of the project, what did it start, what is the status, how much of the physical work is done, how much of the bills have been settled, and so forth. And I would say it had significant impact and improvement, particularly recovering from COVID and the massive disruption in work cycles. But at some point, I started getting worried that the data was not being updated often enough, though we would meet once a month. And in many cases, I wasn't that confident that the data reflected reality. Meeting is tomorrow, somebody enters some number today. I'm not sure I can go check it personally. That's where I think AI and image processing come in. We've already in Tamil Nadu framed our own policy this is not the forum for me to go into detail about that, but the early use cases that we have on government platforms is for things like eye checkups, retinal scans, oral health checkups, crop surveys, insurance validation for crop insurance. And a lot of these image-based compared to massive databases that have enough cases that they're thoughtful and very likely to be accurate is quite high and quite good. So I think, in my understanding, were I to be back in the chairmanship of that committee, I would actually do a lot more drone AI validation of all the data that I was getting and actually have confidence that these projects were running the way they were supposed to be. What's important about government projects is that usually governments can borrow at the lowest cost of financing of anybody in an economy because they're the government, they're the place that raises taxes and prints the bills. And usually the projects governments undertake are very high multiplier effect projects like roads, water systems, hospitals, greenfield, industrial sites, etc. So in that sense, if the project management of the government improves, its impact both in terms of efficiency of government spending as well as actual acceleration of growth variables is quite high. So I think, in every way, yeah, of course, in the commercial space, of course, in the services space, as I say, my own experience in the financial services sector, huge improvements can be made with the right professionals and the right thinking process of project management, particularly in the age of sustainability. AI, for all its other benefits, is going to have huge negative environmental impacts because it's a guzzler of power and of water and other resources. So these are some things we have to balance out. I was just talking to the president, international president, at lunchtime and saying that had I the option, I would have liked to stay and listen to some of the presentations because I'm sure I would have learned quite a bit, but sadly I have some other events to go to today. So I'm going to leave after this inauguration, but it's only my loss. I hope the rest of the day is a great gain for all of you. You get to learn and see things and expand your understanding and build new networks and friendships. And I'm so happy that you chose to do this here. It's always kind of second order effect for us because more of our professionals, more of our young people will find it easier to participate if you do it in Chennai as opposed to, I don't know, Delhi. And so we're happy you chose to do it here. We aim to be a big player in the defense sector, which is where many of you are from, the industrial sector, where many of you are from. As I say, we know we can get benefits in the government sector. And so we need a lot more of you, and we need you to do much better and become better at what you do. And so I wish all of you the best. I thank you for coming and thank you for bearing with me.